I like founders whose brain works like the Facebook algorithm. The more data points they're getting, they're constantly adapting, they're constantly changing, and therefore they're always heading towards the same North Star. But the path of how you get there is, never a straight line if you think about it.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
We have Carter Reum on the show today, and I'm telling you, this is one of my favorite conversations around startups, entrepreneurship, how to take action on your why not now idea while being brave and also wise at the same time. Carter has a very decorated career. He has the chops to be talking about this. He is at the top of his game. He's seen it all, and he's been on so many different sides of this dynamic. He started off at Goldman Sachs, then he moved on to become an entrepreneur himself and founded a company called VEEV, which sold to a multi-billion-dollar strategic acquirer. And he now runs M13, which is a venture fund that is doing extremely well. They have a portfolio totaling over $137 billion in enterprise value. And their portfolio includes companies like Lyft, Reum, Daily Harvest, you name it. So Carter has a lot of value to share in this conversation. And one of the things that I really appreciate about him is that he breaks it down. It's very practical information and advice, but he also is extremely grounded. Given some of the things that he's done, you can just hear the humanity. You can hear the care for the entrepreneurs that he works with and the integration of the lessons that he's been able to learn and then share with others. Oftentimes when you start, discussing venture and raising capital and entrepreneurship with certain levels of people who have done some big, big things, the conversation can easily get intimidating and feel a little out there. That's not the case with this conversation. So if this is a world that is not familiar to you, this is a great place to start. And for those of you listening who have that idea, you are ready to take that first step over the starting line and greenlight your idea, this is a very practical conversation to listen to. One of the things that I took away that I've implemented immediately is one thing that Carter does every Sunday. And I've started to do this, and it shapes my week differently. It adds a lot more focus and really eliminates some of the excess in terms of to-do items and or meetings that aren't really necessary. So keep an ear out for that tip as well. I have copious notes from our conversation, and I think you will too. Without further ado, here is Carter Reum. Oh, and fun fact, Carter and Paris Hilton recently became engaged. So he mentions her a couple of times as well, and you can keep a heads up for that. Carter, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And in the spirit of why not now, let's hop right in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that minute, hour, season, and really understand how you went from idea to action.
Yeah, I think, I think about the first time I had one of those moments, and obviously I've had a lot of those moments since then. I think the first time was when my brother was trying to persuade me to leave Goldman Sachs to become an entrepreneur. And I think about it, it was just over 15 years ago. And my brother and I were both investment bankers at Goldman Sachs, had great jobs. I'd committed to go work at the largest private equity firm in Los Angeles. And my brother was on the deal team that took Under Armour public. And so got to know Kevin Plank. And, as I joke around, although it seems like today there's a lot of 32-year-olds about to IPO a billion-dollar company, that was not the case back then, right? And Kevin Plank had, his claim to fame with Under Armour was he was the fastest consumer company ever to get to 100 million in sales. The shocking part is it only took him 10 years. So put that into perspective in terms of what these companies can accomplish now. I remember my brother, I'd taken a job a year before I was going to leave Goldman to go and work at this private equity firm. And my brother said, I think we should be entrepreneurs. And I always joke around, now if any of us were to, tell our bosses at Goldman Sachs we're going to leave to be an entrepreneur, they'd say, of course you are, right? But back then, 15 years ago, people thought we were kind of crazy. And I remember we wrote a book that hit the bestseller list a few years ago, and I got a great LinkedIn message from a mentor at Goldman. And he said, when you left Goldman, everyone thought you were crazy, period. I just felt really bad for you, period. Just turned on the TV, looks like everything turned out okay. And he had just seen us on CNBC or something. I was thinking to myself, I told him I was going to go be an entrepreneur. My life wasn't ending. It was just actually starting. And, I always encourage people to think about, play it forward. And usually the perception of risk is confused with the lack of knowledge. And so my goal at the time was to go end up at something like Harvard Business School. And so I thought to myself, okay, two things are going to happen if I go make this jump. And I always say the reason we made the jump is we were just young enough and just stupid enough, but in a good way, to think it was a good idea, right? You have to have a certain brazenness about you. And so I would say to people, well, there's actually no risk in what I'm doing going to start a company, because two things will happen. One is we'll be unsuccessful, and I'll be an even better candidate to get into HBS, because at the time they didn't want investment bankers. They wanted failed startup people. That was a hot commodity. There weren't that many of those out there, right? And then on the flip side, thankfully, what happened is we ended up being successful. And as a result of that, they never let me into HBS, but I've been teaching a case study on the company we started for about 12 years. And so basically what I told people, either way, I end up in a better place. And so what a lot of people were looking at as a risky decision to turn down a really great job, I actually said, look, I actually don't think there's that much risk. Either way, I end up probably in a better place. And I always laugh because we take all these forks in the road early. I used to have slicked back hair and red power ties, and I only wore pinstripes, and that was my persona. And I haven't worn anything but sneakers and shirts like this in the last 15 years, right? And so you take these great forks and, it dictates whatever, but there tends to be a lot of other forks in the road depending on what your journey is.
Amazing. I love what you just said. So usually the perception of risk is really a lack of knowledge. Is that what you said? So in that case, then Carter, so you say I was thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, but what were you really looking to start? Like, did you have the idea at that moment, or was it, I'm just going to start something? Because usually it's, I'm going to go build XYZ. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's two types of entrepreneurs. There's either the kind of big thinkers who are looking for this kind of moonshot idea. I don't ever think, I've never been one of those, right? I've never been going, what's my big idea? I'm more the entrepreneur that says, hey, what is already happening and how can I improve upon it? And so in this particular case, my brother had worked on the largest alcohol merger of all time while he was at Goldman and saw an opportunity to innovate in the liquor space. Now we're venture capitalists. It's a road not often traveled from, starting a liquor company out of the back of our car to becoming a venture capitalist. And we didn't know anything about liquor. We just saw an opportunity to be innovative in the space. And so we actually did leave to particularly, very specifically focus on that idea. I think, again, when you think about any decision, whether it's an investing decision, a personal decision, you're always trying to think about, is there more upside versus the risk? Like, what's the risk adjusted return we talk about in the investor world? In this particular case, one of the things that I think gave us comfort to leave and go and be an entrepreneur is we actually had a particular idea and we thought it was a good idea, right? Sometimes that's possible, sometimes it's not, but it all factors into effectively the risk equation on whether you think it's got more upside than potential downside, because every decision we make has both.
What gets you out of bed in the morning? What lights you up, and what gives you positive energy, to do everything you do?
Yeah, my team always laughs because once a week in stand-ups, we always do, what color are we, both personally and professionally? And I'm always bright green. And I'm always bright green because, I have good days, I have bad days. To me, it's more of a mindset. To me, having started a company and sold a company, when we then said, what do we want to do next? I used to tell people whatever level of success we've had, what it's bought us was the flexibility to do what we want with who we want. And that's what we set out to create with our new company, M13, our venture capital firm. And one of our guiding principles was everybody had to pass the airport test. Now, what I mean by the airport test is, would you want to be stranded in an airport with this person? And I can be honest, not every person at every company passes the airport test. When you have big organizations, that's probably just unrealistic, right? But one of the things that was a driving principle for us is we wanted to be around both internally with our team and then the investors the founders we are investing behind. We are very intellectually curious. So we wanted to surround ourselves with very smart, very good human beings that we could actively learn from every single day. And so that was literally one of our guiding principles. We have to build an organization that can be supported by people that all pass the airport test. And so for me, that's manifested itself, 5 years after we started M13, that I get to wake up every single day. I get to work with our team. I get to work with all these great founders that we were invested in. So I get to work with great people doing things I love, which is helping build businesses.
I'm hopping in here to tell you about a new discovery of mine. I'm in love, and let me tell you, I've fallen hard. We all like our caffeine in the morning. I look forward to that first, second, and fifth cup of coffee in the morning, but now I exclusively drink super coffee. I'm such a fan that I actually invested in the company, the team, and their culture. The love for what I do every day makes me jump out of bed in the morning, but super coffee truly fuels that fire. It's fueled with positive energy, from the ingredients they use to their brand promise. Super coffee removes the negatives like sugar and adds the positives like MCT oil and protein so that you can maximize your day. I have an embarrassing secret. I used to be addicted to diet soda. I'd roll out of bed and pop open a can before my eyes were even fully open. I had never been a huge coffee drinker, but when I gave up diet soda on July 12th, 2015, yes, the moment deserves an anniversary. It was a big deal. I needed another caffeine source at that point. For me, that meant coffee with lots of artificial sweeteners, with crazy ingredients I can't pronounce that made me crash by 2 p.m. or so. Well, not anymore. Super coffee is different. As I mentioned, there's no added sugar, and some of the flavors I love have 10 grams of plant protein. Now, I'm not a big meat eater, so this really helps, and they've just added a few new flavors to their plant-based offering, like French vanilla and sweet cream. They only use ingredients that are great tasting, great for you, and sustain you for the long haul. Nothing shady, only positives. The taste is delish, I can tell you. Take it from someone who needs that extra flavor to enjoy the taste of coffee. And super coffee also comes in ground coffee, Keurig pods, creamers, and more on their website, drinksupercoffee.com. One of the things my team and I love most is that on drinksupercoffee.com, you can shop Super Coffee's wide variety of products based on your dietary needs, including gluten-free, plant-based, Whole30, keto, or even vegan, right there on their website. There's something for everyone. While you're on the site, go ahead and stock up because Super Coffee is hooking up Why Not Now listeners with a 25% discount. Head to supercoffee.com and use the code WHYNOTNOW for your 25% discount on all products. drinksupercoffee.com is the only place this offer is available, and your discount works again for all products. Just use Why Not Now as your code, all one word. There are no restrictions. I'm an investor in Super Coffee because the founders truly do walk the talk. Yes, their coffee provides positive energy, but so does their company culture. Their founders are three brothers who share a work hard and be nice to people mentality, and they spread that throughout their culture at Super Coffee. They know the importance of having diverse perspectives at the leadership level, and you know I'm a fan of elevating women in leadership. In fact, one of my Renegade Accelerator grads, Jamie Christ, is one of those women. So once that positive energy arrives on your doorstep, hit me up on social at Amy Jo Martin and show me what flavors and products you went with. And bonus points if you try one of their seasonal blends. The company is growing quickly, and you'll probably start noticing Super Coffee in your local Walmart, Target, or Costco. They are now in over 30,000 retailers nationwide. To take advantage of your exclusive 25% discount, head to drinksupercoffee.com and enter Why Not Now at checkout. That's Why Not Now, all one word. drinksupercoffee.com is the only place this offer is available, and your discount works for all products, no restrictions. Amazing. And I've become pretty more familiar with M13, and just it's cool to see female leadership too, and some of your partners. And that's one thing, I have a theory as an investor, and also having raised funds before or raised money. I don't just want to see women get a seat at the table. I want to see them get a seat at the cap table, because that's really when you start influencing things, right? So that's exciting. So props to you. When you think about investing, and let's just say not even financially, but investing in these founders, what are ways that you're investing in their growth? Like, what are some of the things that you immediately want to do? Let's say you're backing them now, and you're wanting to make sure that they are at the top of their game. How do you accelerate them?
Our mission with M13 when we founded it 5 years ago was, how do we build a next generation venture platform? And then we said, what does that mean? And what we basically said is that, the thesis was that founders need more than financial support. And why is that the case, right? We invest in consumer technologies. And so what we talk about is this horizontal layer of consumer technology, because more and more companies can effectively disintermediate traditional distribution models and have a direct relationship with the consumer. So that could be a telemedicine platform like Heal we invested in, or Capsule. That could be something like Lyft or Pinterest, but so many, or a marketplace for food like Chef that we invested in. And then we said, look, the reason it's so challenging for any founder these days is there's been a complete democratization of the ability to launch new companies, right? When we were one of the first investors in Ring Doorbell, they were the only one that had the idea for a wireless doorbell. Now there's hundreds, and there might even be thousands. Or when we invested early in Bonobos, they were the only one selling pants online. Now imagine how silly that sounds, because a lot of people sell pants online, right? And so because of that, there's just more and more competition, right? Every good idea we see, there's 10 or 15 extremely qualified founders who are well pedigreed, well funded, all going after the same space. And because of that, coupled with the idea that so many more founders can have this direct relationship with the consumer, couple that with kind of the advent of ad technology, Facebook targeting, the difference between winning and losing has never been greater, right? So this idea that, like, in direct to consumer, just because it's the easiest to quantify, a 1% difference in 4 key e-commerce statistics is a 400% increase in sales. And as Albert Einstein called the greatest invention of all time, compounding. So the difference between a top quartile e-com company and second quartile company is 5x, right? And so you're talking about 1% difference leads to very different outcomes. And so we basically said, look, how do we build a venture firm with this guiding principle of kind of built by founders, for founders, and literally build a machine and a team that every single day aims to help them execute better. So for us, there's two things that every entrepreneur, when out of our first fund that we started deploying in 2015, we were fortunate enough to seed or be the initial investor in 7 unicorns, right now, billion-dollar companies. And we kind of studied those and said, why is a business like Daily Harvest a unicorn these days where their competitors effectively went out of business? We think that two things that all the best founders do. One is they make better day-to-day decisions. And the way we talk about it is no single decision moves the needle, but a lot of decisions compounded over a lot of time moves the needle. And two, along the way, they had some unfair advantage that created step change growth that activated the flywheel. That could be getting a great investor, a great hire, a great advisor, a key retail relationship, a big media moment, whatever that is. And so we basically said, look, how do we build a firm around the idea that we need to help entrepreneurs in both of those two things? And so for us, it's not as simple as, oh, we're just going to help with this thing or that thing, because the journey is long and there's a lot of day-to-day decisions that have to be made. And there's got a lot of unfair advantages we have to bring to the table. And so for us, what gets us so excited is because we invest earlier stage, kind of Series A, Series B, is we can change the trajectories of these companies, and that can make a big impact. So the analogy I use is, right, and then I'll pause here. If you shoot a rocket from Earth to the moon, if you change the trajectory of the company or the rocket 1 degree, right, after a mile, you're only 92 feet off course. But by the time you get to the moon, well, in fact, you never get to the moon because you're 4,169 miles away. And that's what our model is designed to do, is work with founders to change the trajectory 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 degrees. And if we can do that, we can create a much larger and different outcome.
So you mentioned the day-to-day decision making. And, as an investor, especially if it's early stage, sure, they're going to have a bit of a track record, but you really don't know too much until you start working with them what their decision-making, process is like. Is there a way you analyze that when you're considering deals? How do you judge someone's decision-making, or is it just balance sheet? Like they've made good decisions because they've got numbers?
No, yeah, I think it's like, the first guiding principle is we don't focus on just the founder, we focus on the founding teams, right? So we recognize that building a company is a team sport, and it's never just one person. It's, you look at the PayPal mafia, it was the perfect bringing together of multiple people, different skill sets, different vantage points. And one of the things we always talk about is in any teams that we back, we want there to be positive tension. And what we mean by that, right, is we want different vantage points, different backgrounds, different biases. If the worst thing you can do is, most founders say, oh, I'm going to call up my buddy from high school and see if he wants to be my co-founder. That's, in our estimation, that's the worst thing you could do, right? You want someone that brings a different perspective, a different kind of skill set to the table. So the first thing we do is look at what's the complete founding team and making sure there's diversity of, again, backgrounds, kind of genders, ethnicities, experiences, because we believe that leads to better decision making. I think also, right, every investor, it's pretty played out at this point, talks about, oh, we invest behind great founding teams. But what does that actually mean? What are the attributes that a good investor looks for? I think one of the things that is unique that I always look for in founders that is different today than I believe 5 years ago, especially 7, 8 years ago, is I look for founders who have two kind of common traits. One is this idea that they love to test, learn, and iterate, right? I always say when a company launches, you don't launch to learn to scale, you launch to learn how to scale, right? And if you do that correctly, you end up with exponential growth. And if you don't do that correctly and you launch to scale, you end up in a very different place, which typically is linear growth. And then the second trait that goes hand in hand with that is I look for founders that have strongly held beliefs loosely. And what I mean by that is I want leaders and founders that have strong beliefs, strong theses, strong North Stars, but they also have to hold them loosely because the world is changing so quickly. The competition within a certain product or an idea is changing. Think about something like the fact that people aren't going grocery shopping anymore, right? Because during COVID, right, they've been using things like Instacart. Well, that's the most frequent behavior that every household in America does on average between 2.5 and 3 times a week. That has ripples beyond just grocery shopping. That has ripples in terms of, right, how am I going to get my pharmacy and my prescriptions? We obviously hope that's with our portfolio company Capsule. but it has different kind of ramifications, right? And I think, we look for founders that are willing to have theses, but are willing to test them. And as new information becomes available, they're willing to change them, right? And so it's not a pivot. Like, to me, a pivot's like a harder directional turn. But, I like founders whose brain works like the Facebook algorithm. The more data points they're getting, they're constantly adapting, they're constantly changing, and therefore they're always heading towards the same North Star. But the path of how you get there is, never a straight line if you think about it.
With founders, and as someone who clearly, I'm sure you're analyzing a lot of different companies, and you've had your fair share of opportunities to do so. What are some of the biggest differences between male and female founders that you've noticed?
We are very proud as a firm. We've backed kind of over 35% of companies that have a female co-founder, about the same percentage of underrepresented groups. And we believe in doing that, not just because we think we want to take a leadership position in ESG and kind of diversity, but also we just honestly think it leads to better outcomes, right? And it kind of does ladder back to different perspectives, at the table. We've obviously backed some incredible founders, people like Rachel from Daily Harvest that are female, people like Ara Katz from Seed. And I think, some of the traits that you would stereotype as male and female, I think show up, right? I think, sometimes you can have male founders that probably aren't as thoughtful as they need to be when making certain decisions. It's a little more of that hard charging. I think, a lot of our female founders just take a lot more into consideration when they're making decisions. And one of the things we think about a lot at M13 is we try to lead as a firm with empathy, and you don't hear that much from a VC. And, we have partners like Christine Choi, who was working with Richard Branson and Virgin kind of globally. And I remember the first thing she said to me is, well, I'm not sure I want to work at a VC. And I said, well, we're not trying to create just another VC. We're trying to create something very different. And she joined, and, whenever founders talk to her, they say, man, I just had the best talk with Christine. She asked me, why did I start this company? And she asked me about my family and what motivates me and things like that. And, now that's kind of rippled throughout the organization. And I think, it's something we think about a lot. I think a lot of female founders lead their organizations with more empathy. Male founders aren't perfect, female founders aren't perfect, but I think they tend to kind of lead with that. So, but, to be honest, when I think about founders, I just think about great founders, right? And whether they're from underrepresented groups or different kind of genders, I don't think it's fair, both positively and negatively, to kind of say, oh, female founders are this way and male founders are that way. There's tremendous founders, regardless of their gender, ethnicity, and backgrounds. So it's really trying to find the right people. And then, I do think we all have to be aware of unconscious bias. One of the first things we do with our portfolio companies is we provide them a presentation on unconscious bias and make it part of our onboarding, kind of an optional training, because we all live in a world where, unfortunately, there is unconscious bias. And so we've done a lot to make sure that we are giving, whether it's people to join our team, people to join the teams of our portfolio companies, or people that get our capital, trying to make sure we recognize that we all deal with unconscious bias and making sure we're opening and being receptive to the best founders with the best ideas, regardless of those backgrounds.
Amazing. And I see Adam Grant's new book in the background there. I have it too. Think Again. And he's been on the show and he's talked about that. And it's, it's almost, he even refers to it sometimes as subconscious bias. Like it's fascinating to look at some of the research. So let's just say, if you were to give one piece of advice to people who are pitching you, I'm sure you've noticed a lot of trends and themes, and what would be the top piece of advice?
I look for people who can inspire. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, we're storytellers, and entrepreneurs believe the impossible is possible, right? And, you as a leader have to inspire on a day-to-day basis. You have to inspire investors like me to give you capital. That then gives you the license to go and have the opportunity to build something great. You have to go inspire people to join your team when it's absolutely crazy, right? To join your team because you don't have the funding, or you're not built out, or the idea isn't big. Once you have that team, you have to inspire people to work that extra mile, whether it's early in the morning, late at night, or log into their computer. And so for me, when we're investing early stage, no company is perfect, right? You're looking for directional North Stars, and you're looking for me, for somebody that can inspire those around them to get on this journey. And if you can get people on the journey, you have as good a shot at anyone at achieving what might have seemed impossible or a change in behavior. I always laugh about things like Airbnb. If I would have called you up 12 years ago and said, do you want to rent my couch for $50? You would have hung up on me and thought I was crazy. And now we're like, you don't rent your guest bedroom or your pool house? That's crazy that you don't, right? But these are big, seismic shifts in thinking and consumer behavior, but they happen because people and leaders inspire others. And over time, they're able to affect that change.
That's amazing. Oh, I love that answer. I just came across the email that the original email and the idea behind Airbnb when they went public. Did you see it circulating around? It was awesome.
You also have to join. We have a book club where we're reading Adam Grant's book on our book club. We back this tremendous female entrepreneur named Padma Warrior, who is on the board of Microsoft and Spotify, and she's effectively digitizing the book club using cues from her experience at Spotify, with a focus on kind of mental well-being, given the connection between literacy and mental well-being. So Adam's book is our first book club book that we're unearthing on Fable, her digital book club app. So yeah, it's an invite to join us anytime you want for our digital book club.
There you go. And the listeners can join too. I love the name Fable. What a great, I love that integration too. What a good VC you are, bringing in your little product placement.
Please know that people look to me in terms of what they might not know today, but they're going to want to know tomorrow. So I feel like I owe it to you and your listeners to sprinkle in some of this next level technology, because it will, the greatest part about being a consumer tech investor is we invest in things very specifically that improves people's lives, right? So it's really fun, whether it's a daily harvest or Fable or Capsule, you're making positive. So it makes it easier to plug your companies because, the listeners are going to benefit, Imoja.
Absolutely. Well, and to just transition right into it. So Monday.com is one of my favorite tools from a productivity standpoint. And everyone listening knows that I'm a huge fan. What's your top productivity tip?
Yeah, try to think. I don't know if any of them are not obvious. One thing I did a few years ago was I decided not to let my inbox be my to-do list. And I remember someone much smarter than I am telling me that, look, your inbox is everyone else's demands on your time versus you dictating where you want to spend your time. So the first thing I've done is decouple myself from the inbox and remember that's what everyone else wants from me, but what do I want to do, right? And so I start the day, I start every Monday and I start the day with thinking what do I want to get done today and focusing on that. So whether it's using Superhuman and certain kind of email tools, but really, when I think about my day and what makes me happiest, it's always how do I create systems where kind of to Pareto's principle, I focus on the 20% of things that are important to me, right? And I usually try to focus on the quadrant that's the key indicator is impact, right? Am I making the biggest impact? Whether that's kind of that. I try to avoid the quadrant that is low impact, right? Especially high effort, low impact. That's my favorite quadrant. I hope to never go there. Then obviously there's a lot of stuff in the middle that we all just have to do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And then the last place I focus is most of us feel overwhelmed or unengaged, not because we don't like the 20% of stuff we're doing, usually not because of we don't like the middle. It's usually actually the lowest 20% that we could do without. And so I wake up, on Sunday, I always look at my calendar and say, hey, are there meetings that I don't need to have? Or are there things on my to-do list that I can push or don't need to do? Because I find I'm happiest when I kind of trim that lowest 20% of stuff. And I always think to myself, is it important or is it urgent? And if it's neither of those two things, I should be able to do something with it. And, for me, thing that all of us who are overachievers, we're really good at prioritization. And what I mean by that is we want to do everything and we want to do it tomorrow, right? That's why we're overachievers. The hardest part for most people, including myself, is deprioritization, right? So I do a lot of road mapping with myself personally, with my teams, because I go, look, I know all the priorities. That's about a list of about 1,000 things on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. The key is, how do I have to work harder to deprioritize stuff and go, gosh, I really want to do that this month, but I'm going to have enough discipline and I'm going to push that till 3 weeks. But you can only do that if you're road mapping, right? Otherwise, everything feels important and urgent, but that's typically not the case. So how do I shift the stuff that's not urgent and move it down the line?
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Being able to design my own day and do it in the most efficient way is a non-negotiable for me. I'm a bit of a time management nerd, so when I find something that allows me to be more efficient and effective to get the most out of my day, I want to share it with everyone. I want you to head to monday.com/AJM, because here's the scoop. I have a new tool in my productivity tool belt, and it's called Monday. Monday.com. My team and I have never felt more organized, professionally and personally. And my to-do list is no longer the boss of me. I feel more in control because every project, initiative, date, task, they're all captured and organized in one place. And my team is in the loop and involved every step of the way. Monday.com/AJM is where you can find your brand new operating system. Everything has its own home, deadline. You can see the team members associated with the tasks, and it's even color coordinated, so you can easily navigate your own task list. It's amazing. So we all have multifaceted jobs, businesses, and lives. With Monday, you're able to keep all of these components organized in their own compartments. But you're also only one click away from seeing the big picture and how they all integrate together. Creating systems and procedures within your day in business saves a lot of time. For example, my team and I have a dedicated board for this very podcast. Did you know there are 28 steps involved in getting one podcast just to air? It's the same exact process every time, and it's a system. And we have the various key steps mapped out, and they're set up as tasks on our podcast board. And this allows for my team and I to stay in lockstep every step of the way. I've even noticed a decrease in emails and meetings since we started using Monday. So you can head to monday.com/AJM and check out how I use it. One feature I love is that my social media content calendar is built inside of monday.com. I finally have one that I actually use. I like it, and it's embedded into my overall calendar as well. Another feature we use every day is the Google Doc integration. You know, I love a good spreadsheet. I can pull them into monday.com and edit them right there versus having 97 tabs open on my computer. If how we spend our days is how we spend our lives, then I can't think of anything more important than using the time in our days wisely. Head to monday.com/AJM to start your free trial today. That's monday.com/AJM, which is short for Amy Jo Martin, if that's how you need to remember it. And you'll see how I use it, what's in it for you, and that's where you get your free trial. So if you start using Monday, hit me up on social media. Let me know how you're using it, what your experience is like, and we can swap tips and tricks. I wish I had started using it sooner. So let's just say it's Sunday and you're looking at your calendar and you're like, this meeting on Thursday, this person really wanted to meet with me. They tried hard. They got it on the calendar, and it's actually not a priority. What do you do? What's that conversation like?
It's funny. I try to be totally honest and candid because I realize a lot of people are selfish with my time, but I need to be selfish with my own time. And so when we were building the firm, I was working, 20 hours every weekend and, I don't know how many hours a day, 16, a lot of numbers, right? And I would say to people, hey, look, I'm just really too busy. I just have to focus on, quite honestly, my well-being. But if you want, you can come, to my beach house on Saturday and we could spend 30 minutes. And I was honestly just blown away by how many people said, sure, what time works on Saturday? And I was kind of thinking to myself, don't they think to themselves, is there anything else he'd rather be doing on Saturday at 1 p.m. at his beach house than meeting with me and giving advice? And I had this insight that they weren't thinking about me. They were just thinking about themselves. And as much as I would love to help every entrepreneur and speak to everyone, we all are limited in that, right? And so it was kind of an interesting insight for me. I said, look, I just need to be more selfish and I need to respect my own time. And so quite honestly, now I'm just very honest with people and say, look, I would absolutely love to talk to you. I would love to give you advice. I'm just absolutely buried. It's important to me that I take care of my own mental and physical well-being. And in order to do that, I just have to take stuff off my plate. And that way I just am very upfront about it. Unfortunately, only 8 out of 10 people respect that. There's always 1 or 2 that kind of, will oh, okay, I'll email you back in a few weeks. I was like, that was not an email back in a few weeks. That was like I'm probably going to be in the same place in a few weeks. But for the most part, I think people respect that when you're upfront. Otherwise, we get in these kicking the can down the road, and then we eventually all feel overwhelmed.
Interesting. And then I'm sure you get a lot better at identifying on the front side of what to say yes to and what not to. And that algorithm is constantly getting more effective, right?
One of the reasons we were so excited when we wrote our book, Shortcut Your Startup, a few years ago, was everything that I would say in a coffee to somebody, we were able to write into a book. And so I always tell people, like, honestly, if you want to pick my brain, just read the book. And I don't mean that in like, I don't have time for you, but we've published it around the world. We've sold over 100,000 copies, right? We're able to impact a lot more people because I can't have 100,000 coffees, but it's one of the most fulfilling things that I get. On a weekly basis, I get an email or a LinkedIn from someone saying, hey, I read this book, I've marked it up, and it was so incredibly helpful when I made this decision, right? And so, you start to also think about how do you make as big an impact as possible, knowing you can't always do that in a one-to-one way, whether it's coming on a podcast like this, which I'm obviously so humbled that you're having me, or writing a book or something like that.
Very smart. I learned that from Tony Hsieh, who was a mentor and an early investor, and he would always say, just read my book. And it does work, though. Especially, I'll even send it to it. Like, here's the audio version. You can even. It's more time than we'd be able to have, for coffee or something. So, how do you invest in yourself, Carter? Like, what are you doing to invest in yourself?
Yeah, I think, when I think about investing myself, it's always probably 3 buckets. It's probably my mental well-being, my physical well-being, and then my development, right? Because I think all of us, even if you're Michael Jordan, right, he's famous for being in the gym, trying to get better every season. And I think the top performers, I think whether it's sports or work, they always they have 2 shared common traits. One is, I always say, the best people do regularly what good people do sometimes, right? It's a certain consistency of performance. And then quite honestly, they all just get better over time, right? And so those are 2 things on the development side I'm always thinking about. And those could be soft skill sets like leading as a leader or leading with empathy. It could be hard skill sets like something I want to learn. I think on the mental and the physical well-being, one thing I realized is, it's kind of obviously someone we respect and admire a lot is somebody like Tony Robbins. And obviously he talks about, right, it's kind of this idea, you have to put your oxygen mask on before you can help others on the airplane. You got to take care of yourself because your body is your temple. If you don't do that, you can't function at a high level for your family and your significant others, and certainly not in the workplace. And so on the physical well-being side, I built out a wellness center during COVID. I joke around, a wellness center is like the new version of a screening room in Los Angeles. So I have hyperbaric chamber, and I have infrared sauna, and I have LED lights. And I just try to kind of make sure I do one thing a day around my mental or physical well-being, something like that. And then on the mental well-being, it really just comes down to how do I find the moments or the tools to just make sure I'm always kind of looking myself in the mirror mentally. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about my favorite thing that I do every day, which is a company we invested in. But it's effectively a wearable device. I was just wearing it here, but it's basically a wearable device that you put on for 20 minutes a day. And it uses neurostim technology. It's called the Cove. And it basically mimics human touch. And by doing so, your body releases oxytocin, and scientifically proven reduces stress and anxiety among like 3,500 clinical trials. What I love about this, and obviously I'm biased, and I'm sorry for the shameless plug, but you did lead me to it, was that, I look for solutions that give me back time that don't take time away from me. So I love to meditate. I often find myself not having time for that. And so I try and find things like the Cove, where while you and I are talking, I can be using it. That's effectively giving me back time, right? Or I've done a lot of stuff around breathing exercises. I remember my cortisol levels, as you can imagine, are off the charts high. I talk fast, I move fast, I work a lot. And the doctor said, oh, just take 3 deep breaths a day and it will really bring down your cortisol levels. I was like, you should come spend a day with me. I promise you, good sir, 3 deep breaths a day are not bringing down these cortisol levels. And he sent me a study from the Harvard Medical Review, and scientifically proven 3 deep breaths a day. And so I have this Deepak Chopra love tuner whistle, and 3 times a day, I'll just do 3 deep breaths through it. It uses this frequency. And just that alone, it takes me 30 seconds, 3 times a day, and scientifically proven, I feel a lot better. And so, I try to just do stuff on the margin.
Do you do it the same time every day? Do you try and get into that routine, or how do you remember?
Yeah, on my Cove, on my wearable device, I do it every morning for my first conference call and at the end of the day. That way I kind of modulate myself. You only have to do it once a day, but I like kind of habit forming. On the other things, I tend to just do it when necessary, but I look for visual cues. So I leave, my love tutor whistle out. So after this, if I'm feeling a little riled up and I'm excited, I'll just go, okay, while I grab my lunch, let me just do my 3 deep breaths or something like that.
Oh, cool. I love it. Oh my gosh. What's one thing you find yourself learning over and over again?
As a leader, it's probably just around people, right? And I don't think that ever stops, right? In terms of my job at the firm, now we have 27 people and 10 partners and offices in New York, LA, and places, and presidents in San Francisco. For me, it's so much about building culture and leading and kind of inspiring, like we talked about. That doesn't change and that never stops. I don't think any of us are ever too good at that, right? And also, things change, right? The expectations of certain demographics of the world we're living in changes. One of the first things I did when COVID happened is I said, I have to change how I lead in a virtual world. Right? I can't stop by someone's desk and say, hey, by the way, what did you think of that candidate? So I have to be more process driven. I don't have the opportunity to go to a water cooler, quote unquote, and ask somebody, hey, what did you do this weekend? Because we get on Zoom and we immediately start going through the agenda. So, I made a thing that twice a day, I would just Slack video someone or FaceTime someone at the organization every day and just say, hey, what's happening? And at first, everyone was very thrown off, like, hey, what's up? And I was like, oh, no. I honestly, there's no agenda, no intention. I am just calling to say hi. This is the proverbial water cooler, and we don't have it. And so, I think, and leading with empathy, like we talked about, I think that was something really important, knowing a lot of us were facing very challenging situations and all new to us during COVID. And so for me, I think it's just constantly learning how to be a better leader, how to understand people. I'm a social psych major by trade at Columbia. So I'm always thinking about how do I just break through more? How do I build better relationships and kind of things like that?
And when you Slack people, it's direct. You do it in direct. Yeah.
Always direct. Yeah.
And have you noticed that other people are doing that now?
Yeah, I think that's what I never take for granted as a leader. Your behavior, whether intentioned or not, will always be mimicked, right? And so I used to write a lot of emails on the weekend, and that set an expectation in a very negative way that, hey, well, Carter, he's the founder and he's emailing me on a weekend. Shoot, should I be emailing on a weekend? And I realized that was an example of, I didn't mean for that to be happening. It was because I was working on a weekend because I was trying to build something special with M13. But I realized that was setting the wrong behavior pattern for what I wanted. Because I would say to everyone, oh, take this weekend. I really want you to have a work-life balance. But then on the flip side, I wasn't having that balance, right? And so you start to learn that, all your behaviors will be imitated typically, good or bad, intentioned or not intentioned. And so I've definitely learned over time to have a certain thoughtfulness about just about everything I do, making sure it has the right consequences. And in that case, it was leading to the wrong consequences, even though it was clearly not intentioned.
Amazing. So true. It's so true. So as you think about your life and, you've met some incredible, I call them renegades or like why notters, like professional why notters, right? They can have a gold medal in it. Who are some of the people that come to mind when you think of why not now?
Yeah. I think, one of the obvious ones who's an investor of ours is Sir Richard Branson. I was lucky enough to see him recently. And, obviously they built, I think the stat is $7 or $8 billion plus businesses. But, I love thinkers like Richard. Knowing him very personally, he always starts with, why, not why not, right? Most people would start with sending people to space, like, no way. But he doesn't think like that, right? He thinks as a renegade, as you said, and is kind of thinking like that. So I think he's a great example of that. But I think, what's interesting about that type of thought process is, I could mention a lot of names that are the obvious ones, in Elon or Richard Branson or Travis from Uber, so many. But I think we're all renegades. And there's so many renegades out there. Being a renegade, whether it's sitting on their children's school board and trying to affect change, whether it's someone building a company, whether it's someone who's an innovator in an industry usually dominated by the other gender. There's so many renegades out there. And, my fiance is, one of the things she tries to do is kind of inspire and empower females because she's built a successful career in business herself. And I love supporting her in that because I think there just are so many voices out there. And I love hearing the stories of kind of all these different renegades in whatever capacity, right? And because I think, all of them should be celebrated regardless of where they're doing it, how they're doing it, and what scale that they're doing it.
I love that. And as you kind of back to the investment side of things, with founders, do you find it's important for them to have a personal brand and be sharing the why from their own presence, like online, let's say? Or do you feel like that should be done more from a company megaphone?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I'm not sure I have a totally solid answer. I think it's a combination of the two. I think I love coming on something like this, but I always start with, is it good for M13? And then is it good for me? And so for me, it's always M13 first, and then my personal brand second. I think you can get into situations where if someone's prioritizing their personal brand or their megaphone above their company, that can lead to tensions with co-founders, with investors, and things like that. And so, I think as I wasn't always this way, but I think as I've gotten a little more mature, I've gotten more secure and more comfortable. It probably kind of correlates with having more success along the way. And so now, I try to do everything with a lot of humility, with no ego, and just do whatever asked of me or whatever helps our founders or helps M13. But I always just trying to make sure there's an objective in mind. So I think it's just a balance. I do think we obviously have talked about inspiring. Clearly, with someone with a strong personal brand can inspire people, right? You see it in emerging categories like crypto or NFTs and all these things, right? You need people that are going to be vocal and that have brands, or Gary Vaynerchuk in baseball cards, right? That's how it works. But you can't do it at the detriment to whatever organization or company you're supporting or a part of.
So a few rapid fire questions. Pirates or ninjas, Carter? Who's tougher and why?
Wow. I think ninjas. They're just more malleable, have more tools at their disposal.
Okay. Fair enough. What's something recently that you've read that you found interesting? It doesn't have to be a book, but article, whatever.
Got to go with Adam Grant and his book, a fascinating book.
The new Think Again. Yeah, I love it. A final question here. If you were to go back to yourself, you're an investment banker, you're getting ready to go out on your own and start that entrepreneurial journey, what would you say? Do you have any advice that you would give yourself now that you look back?
Absolutely. There is never a good time for these things. It never makes sense to be an entrepreneur, or never makes sense, in your words, to be a renegade. And you just have to do it, right? I always joke around. We were just young enough and just stupid enough to think it was a good idea. But it was a good idea, right? And we couldn't be happier, but it's never going to be a good time. So you just got to follow Nike's lead and I guess just do it.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time, Carter, and just sharing your wisdom, and congrats on everything you've built. And yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a huge, huge, huge fan of your podcast. So to get to come on here and talk to you meant a lot. So thank you so much.
Hey everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your Why Not Now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?